Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast. We're your hosts, Monty Wyatt and Paul Szysinski. Wherever you are in life, there is a higher ceiling. This podcast is how you become aware of it and how to take action to push through it. It's time to discover your ceiling. Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast, where we talk about your health, your family, your business. I'm Monty Wyatt.
I'm Paul Szysinski.
And I'm excited about today's show. I think we're going to have some great conversations, hear some good stories, and I'm looking forward to what we talk about, because I think our guest has got some great experience, some great knowledge and insight that he's going to share with us. And I want to introduce him, and then we're going to talk about a brief topic. But Gabriel Glynn is a serial entrepreneur. He's had several technology companies and service-based companies, and he's currently CEO of MākuSafe. And they provide wearable technology to improve safety and productivity, and they've got sales all around the globe. And I'm really excited to learn more about that, but you're very much a leader in manufacturing, leader in technology. You've been published in different publications around the world, and you've got some great insights. So welcome to the show. Look forward to having the conversation, Gabe.
Yeah, thanks for having me, gentlemen. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it. It's exciting to be here.
Absolutely. You know, we always like to start with a topic for the day. And Paul, I want to ask you, I want the topic to be leadership through innovation. So when you think of leadership through innovation, what comes to mind to you, Paul?
When I look at leadership through innovations, what I look at, you're not talking it, you're showing it. You go out, you do it. And through innovation is the way you're showing your leadership, that you're out there to be in the market where you're first, second, or third. You're always trying to improve something. And innovation is a big way. When I see someone, Elon Musk is a perfect example. He goes out there, he's more about, that's how his leadership works, is through innovation. You have other people that are leadership, maybe with the people side, but leadership through innovation is where it's not words, it's action, and I like that.
Absolutely, I love that about action. When I think of leadership through innovation, you know, it's thinking differently. It's finding new solutions that maybe no one else has thought of, or no one else has been successful at, and it's seeing a different light or a different opportunity to go after. And you're challenging the world. You're challenging the industry on different ways to think. So, Gabe, what comes to mind when you hear leadership through innovation?
I think about my two boys. I think about I was the inquisitive child that asked a million questions. You know, why this? Why that? Why did you know? And I think that genuine curiosity is really what inspires me to think differently about things. And people ask me, how do you cultivate that? Is there a way you can cultivate that kind of thinking? And I do think there is, and there's a couple of activities that you can do. One of my favorite that I can do with my kids is at breakfast time, try to come up with 3 ideas. Doesn't matter how crazy they are, how stupid they are, how relevant to anybody else they are. Just come up with something, let's write them down. And sometimes, you can get even a little bit more creative and say, like, take the fork off the table and put it down in front of them and say, the fork has been the fork for hundreds of years. It's never changed. Right. If you were going to change it, how would you change it? And they'll, well, I could make it out of this. And they come up with their own material ideas. Or I could make it shaped like this so that I wouldn't have to use a spoon. And they, without knowing it, invented the spork, which already existed, right? But, just that kind of curiosity. And then what happens is, if you're constantly in the mindset of why this, why that, or thinking differently about stuff, opportunities will present themselves, especially as you're out talking to other business leaders and you're learning about an organization or about an industry and how they do things. And your general question becomes, well, why is it done that way? And when you hear, I don't know, it's actually not a very good way to do it, but it's just the way that it's always been done, there's your opportunity. Right? That's your chance to pounce, because there's something that everybody does one way. They know it's not efficient. They know it's not the right way to do it or the best way to do it, but they do it because that's the way it's done. And so I think that's where you can find the opportunity just in that questioning.
Yeah, a great. You find that the quality of your question a lot of times is the quality of the business person that you're in, that you are. And I think you find entrepreneurs are probably more inquisitive than probably anybody else, because you're looking to better yourself, to improve yourself, to do something, and asking why. You're right, asking questions, asking why, and it's kind of neat. That's what an exercise to do with your boys. and they're thinking all the time, especially at that age. I bet they probably have fun with doing it.
they do. Now, they come up with some crazy ideas. The other day, one of them comes running across the street, and I'm like, where are you going, buddy? He goes, I got to go get a marker. I go, well, what do you need the marker for? He goes, well, we're making a sign, him and the neighbor boys. I go, well, okay, what's going on the sign? He goes, well, gooseberries for 50 cents. We're selling gooseberries. And I go, oh, where did you get the gooseberries? He goes, there's a bush in the field behind the house, and we looked it up, and they're gooseberries. And I'm like, okay, all right. So I had to break the news to him about the USDA, and you can't just go sell random berries you find in a field behind your house to consumers and the liability that comes with that. So, but I love the spirit, right? He's always thinking about that. They find berries, and their first thing is, what are these berries? Then they look them up, and they go, what are these berries worth? And they look that up, and they go, I want a PS5, so I could sell X number of berries. So you have to rein it in sometimes.
Wow. Wow, that's probably a little bit of how you started your business.
When I was his age, I sold rocks. My mom got a phone call from one of the neighbors when we moved into a new neighborhood, and she said, I just want to let you know your son is going door to door with a little red wagon trying to sell rocks. And my mom's like, we don't have any rocks. And she goes, no, he's taking them out of our rock gardens in front of our house and then selling them back to us. And so my mom is horrified. We're brand new to the neighborhood. She tracks me down, and she's like, what are you doing? And so I'm telling her, I've got these geodes and these fossils and stuff. I took time. I hand-picked these. These were the best rocks. They didn't even know they had these good rocks, right? And I cleaned them all up and everything. And she goes, well, you can't charge people for their own rocks. And I said, Mom, it's a service business. I'm finding the good ones, cleaning them, and giving them back to them. So I think I should be compensated for my time. And so that's when she knew I was going to be an entrepreneur.
Oh, that's awesome. So, I love that. I think that's a great way to start the conversation. I want you to share with our audience. We call our audience the achiever because they're always going towards the next level. And I want you to share with our achiever kind of your journey and the different things you've done, how you've gone from one step to the next, and a little bit of what that looks like. So if you would share your story a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Just in general, had always been intrigued by business and the thought of being able to build something and eventually grow it, maybe employ some people. I thought that would be kind of fulfilling. And so in the early days, just started a couple of small businesses, nothing really big. The first company I had, I would actually go inside high net worth people's homes, and I'd inventory everything they owned, the fine art, the instruments, guitars, things like that, and I'd keep a record of it for insurance purposes. So if there was ever a fire, or a tornado or something, we could provide all the evidence to the insurance company, and built a neat little lifestyle business around it. Eventually got out of that and into something else, and then found my way into software. And was able to grow a software company that was based in Ankeny, and that was a fun lifestyle business too. Now we had 15 employees, but we had a video game lounge and a ping pong table and a beer fridge and typical kind of Silicon Valley startup attitude. And we grew that. We did a lot of work in the industrial space, so that was kind of a passion of mine. There's a lot of manufacturing here in Iowa and the Midwest, and so we served a lot of those kinds of folks. And then in 2015, we sold that company off, me and my business partner. And I found myself trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And so I went and visited my father. And so my childhood, my father worked third shift at a factory, like a lot of other dads did, back in the 70s and 80s and 60s. And so anyways, I was spending time with him, and he was now a safety manager at a facility. There's about 2,000 employees. And again, still being inquisitive, even though I'm an adult now, I'm asking my dad, why? And so we're at lunch, and my first question is, what does a safety manager do? Like, what's your job? And what he told me was, I wait for something bad to happen. I figure out why it happened. I put a plan in place so it doesn't happen again. Fill out a bunch of paperwork because that bad thing happened, and by the time I'm done with that, something else bad happened. And then I just wash, rinse, and repeat. And I said, well, how do you know your plan that you put in place is any good? When something bad happens, he goes, if nobody else gets hurt, doing that same thing. I said, well, that's a crappy way to find out your plan was bad. And he goes, yeah, and that happens a lot too. And so that was really the inspiration as I started to understand more about that industry and about safety professionals. And he's not unlike almost everybody else in the industry. It's all reactive. And my thought was, how can we apply a proactive approach to safety so that guys like my dad aren't waiting for bad things to happen and dealing with the fallout? They're actually out in front of things before they happen.
That's interesting. I know we talked before, and it kind of falls in line with your family. You had your dad's dad had there was an accident at his work. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that was an interesting story that we heard.
Yeah, so it's actually my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather came to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, looking for work. And like a lot of other laborers of the day, he wasn't very wealthy, and so he rented an apartment on the campus of Douglas Starch Works, which was one of the largest starch producers in the world at the time. So one day he decided that he wanted to leave for lunch instead of sticking around with his work buddies, and so he goes on a date with his fiance, and while he's out for lunch, the factory explodes and kills all of his coworkers. One of the worst industrial accidents in the history of our country and in the state of Iowa. And so he spent weeks, pulling all of his coworkers out of the rubble. There's some really interesting and tragic photos out there. If you go on the Cedar Rapids Gazette archives.
What years would that be?
Oh, I used to know off the top of my head, but yeah, forgive me.
20s and 30s.
Yeah, it was, one of the owners of that died in the Titanic accidents.
Really?
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, one of the guys that owned the Starch Works factory in Cedar Rapids died in one of the most iconic accidents in history. So, but yeah, I feel like part of that has just been a personal calling to me. I didn't know that story when I started MākuSafe. It wasn't until years later when I'm visiting with my grandmother and talking to her about MākuSafe and what we do, and she goes, let me tell you a story. And she had just written an article for so it was the 100-year anniversary in 2019. So it was 1919 that it happened. So she wrote an article for the newspaper about her father leaving, right? And leaving for lunch. And that was my great grandmother he was going on a date with that day. So I wouldn't be sitting with you guys today because of an industrial accident had my great grandfather not been, sneaking out to go on a date. So
it was meant to happen.
It was, remarkable. And so I felt like when she told me that story, it helped affirm why I feel like I have such a passion for the safety industry. And I don't know if you know a lot of safety folks, but I can tell you, my mother was a nurse. She's retired now. And I would say safety professionals and nurses are some of the most passionate people I know in my life. They just genuinely care for human beings. And so that's one of the things that drew me to this industry and why I've really jumped in both feet was the people in this industry. They genuinely care. They want to get better. They really want to work to zero. They want zero accidents. But the reality is, I was telling you gentlemen, more than 1,000 people every day die in a workplace accident on this planet. And a lot of us would think, well, that's probably, third world countries or industrializing countries. We're way better over here. We've got safety programs and things. We lose more than one a week in the state of Iowa. So right here in our backyard.
That's crazy.
And so those are, dinner tables without a dad, without a mom. That's sad. And I think we can make a difference.
So you had this conversation with your dad. It kind of opens up your eyes to what's going on. How did you come up with the idea and where did you head from there?
Yeah. So as a child too, growing up in the Midwest, you guys will appreciate this. What happens when the tornado sirens go off?
Go to the basement or you go to the cellar?
Now, what do we really do here in the Midwest?
We go outside.
Right? We go outside and we look at it. We want to see it, right? We're like, oh man, the sirens are going off. I want to see this sucker, right? And we just had a lot. I mean, we're at over 100 tornadoes in Iowa already this year. We're gonna, set a record for the most in a year. So I was always kind of fascinated by that, and I wanted to apply the same logic. So we know, Ed Wilson. You had Willie Farrell on here, recently.
Yep.
He's good friends with Ed Wilson, and I know Ed fairly well. And so, Ed Wilson will come on a Wednesday, and he'll say, "Hey, if you got plans this weekend, watch out because there's a heightened risk of bad weather, of tornadic activity, and so it's a heightened risk." And they know that because they have all of this data. And they know that when certain factors come together, it creates a greater risk that something bad is going to happen. And so I wanted to apply that same logic to work, right? A lot of times it's a confluence of factors that come together that lead to a heightened likelihood that something bad is going to happen in a workplace. And so the thought was, if we could measure some of those things, and so we're looking at all of the environmental conditions around that worker, everything from sound exposure, sound frequency, decibel level, temperature, humidity, heat index, air quality, lighting, CO2, VOCs, all of this stuff that a worker experiences throughout their shift, and we're gathering that data and processing it in real time, we can begin to understand if some of those factors might be increasing their risk of an exposure, which can also lead to fatigue, which makes people make decisions differently, makes people move their body differently. So we just gather a ton of data around environmentals, around the human motion, the physical force, the physical energy they use to do their job, the physical energy they experience while they're doing their job. And it's actually a really good indicator of who's most likely at risk. And when risk profiles are changing while somebody's working, our system can see that and notify people so they can go in and intervene before something happens. Wow. So very similar to how we forecast bad weather, we forecast risk in a workplace environment.
Now let's talk about this. So you basically innovated, put this company together. How'd you get started? I mean, because I know you're all over the world now.
Yeah.
And you've done it in really a relatively short period of time, with less than 5 years. Tell us how you got started, what obstacles that you ran through to get to where you're at today.
Yeah, I mean, in the earliest days, I didn't have any hardware experience. My background had kind of been in software. I was a tinkerer as a kid. I liked to take apart my parents' VCR and, different electronics and try to make my own things out of it. But I wasn't an engineer, for physical devices. And so I reached out to a gentleman that I didn't know very well. I'd only known him about 6 months, but through the sale of my previous company, I got connected with this guy at IBM, who was in their IoT space. And I found him to be a wonderful and brilliant person. And so he was the first person to come into my heart when I started thinking about who do I know that could help build a thing. And so I reached out to my friend Mark Frederick at the time, and I said, hey, did you know more than 1,000 people a day die in a workplace accident? And he's like, no, but thanks for the stat. Where is this going? And so anyways, long story short, I partnered up with him and we got just some, rudimentary devices out there to be able to see, is this even possible? Can we gather this kind of stuff? And is it valuable? And I remember the first, beta devices that we put into a factory in Altoona. We gathered all this data. It wasn't in real time streaming to us, but we gathered all this data on the devices, uploaded all of the data, and we went through all of the data by hand. We weren't using AI and ML and stuff to process data. So we're looking through all this data and we find out, here's a concentration of high noise levels and decibel levels. And over here, very low lighting. So we kind of map all this stuff out. Then we go back to the factory and we bring some of the more expensive equipment that you can rent and stuff for industrial hygiene. And we started testing. Did the stuff that we found in, quote, real time, because it was recording in real time, just not getting to us in real time, was that accurate with what we were able to go out and measure at the time? And we found correlation. And so that kind of kicked off that, okay, we have something here. The next step is going to be, how do we build a product and how much is it going to cost? Because even though I had just exited from a startup, again, it wasn't a big company. It wasn't a ride off into the sunset, Gabe's ready to retire kind of moment. It was, it was something that helped me kind of catapult into the next thing. But I knew we were going to need a lot of capital to be able to develop an actual enterprise piece of technology that could be sold around the world. So that kind of kicked off that whole journey of figuring out how do we fundraise and get the capital needed to do this.
As I said, our audience is the achiever, and we break through ceilings. To go that step, to get to that first idea and tracking and talking to the companies, how did you have to grow? What did you have to break through in your mindset or in your thought process to even get that far?
Yeah, it was a couple of things. One, I felt like an imposter. right? I'm not a safety guy. And one of the biggest problems I see with technology and technology startups is you might have a really smart engineer or a really smart entrepreneur that thinks they're solving a problem and they can create a piece of technology for it, but they don't really truly understand the customer and they don't really truly understand who the user is. So they create something that is really invaluable or really not valuable for an industry. And so for me, the first thing was I needed validation, and I'm not a safety practitioner. And the thought of trying to go into the safety space, as I said, these people are some of the most passionate people in the world. I felt really inadequate. Can I go talk the talk and walk the walk? And so I invested in training for myself. I became a certified occupational safety specialist. I began reading, going to conferences, absorbing, going to OSHA trainings, doing everything I could to, short of taking a job as a safety professional at a facility, I wanted to understand their world so that when I could talk to them and ask them questions and try to validate my thoughts and opinions, that I came to them at a level that wasn't just an outsider trying to fake my way into an industry. So that was one of the biggest hurdles, especially in the early days.
I'm glad you shared that, because I think every entrepreneur, every leader, every business owner goes through that they feel like an imposter because they don't know everything. They're going into a space that they aren't comfortable with, or they just don't understand. And I'm glad you shared that, because it is about learning. It is about going to that next level and really getting into their shoes to understand.
Yeah, you're right. You find as an entrepreneur, you got a great idea, and you know that if you could, it's going to be something. If you could achieve the information that you're trying to get to that end result is safety and saving human lives. How are you going to do that? And you're right. You've got people that have been in the business for 40, 50 years, and they see you coming in there trying to change it. They're like, what are you going to be able to do better than what we're doing? Which, and then you start feeling like a little bit of an imposter. And then you realize these guys are staying in the same thought process. They need to break out of that thought process and do something different.
Yeah.
And that's probably where you found your crack in the armor.
You're exactly right. And so, there's some gentlemen that have really kind of pioneered, one of the terms that goes around is HOP, human and organizational performance, right? And so we look at safety differently than how we maybe have in the past, where somebody gets hurt and you go, yeah, well, Jim's an idiot, it was bound to happen. Instead we start to look at, why was Jim in a position where this could have happened? What did we do as an organization that failed Jim and put him in that position where he was able to even do that in a way that could hurt him, right? And so when we begin to look inward and we look at the fact that human beings are going to make mistakes. I mean, they make 100 mistakes a day, right? And so, that's going to happen. So then that kind of shifted into this mentality of building capacity to fail, right? So we now look at a process and we go, okay, where is it likely to fail, or where in this continuum can it fail, and how do we build capacity to fail? And I think the way I can describe that the easiest is if you have a coffee, like a Keurig coffee maker at home, right? They've got this tray on the bottom, and the tray on the bottom isn't just a flat piece of plastic. It's actually a tray that's elevated that has some drip holes in it and stuff, right? Because the idiot like me that puts the small cup down there and then pushes the big cup button, it's going to overflow. And that tray is there to have capacity to allow me to fail, right? And so that's what we're trying to look at when we look at processes, and data can help us understand where are we starting to see processes that have the potential to fail, and how do we build capacity in there. So if somebody fails, they're going to fail safely, right? It's still failing the process, but at least they're not going to get hurt or worse off, killed.
Yeah, one of the best things they ever invented was the spit guard at Subway. Anyway.
Yeah.
but
the sneeze guard there.
Yeah. However you call it. So it's really interesting because when you put this together, most of it starts out with human error. So you had mentioned that what was the fatigue, what was distraction, what all those little nuances that go into failure, and by taking those things and put those stats so that it's a lot less chance of being harmed. Now you've done this, and now you've got some data. Kind of tell us a little bit about your data and where you were and where you're at today.
Yeah, I mean, talking about ceilings, right? You're trying to sell a new concept. The industry of wearable safety technology is very, very new. Really didn't exist. Companies don't have a line item budget wearable safety, right? And oftentimes they have very little budgets for safety, right? So you're trying to convince people that, you know, this new technology is going to make a difference. They understand the problem. They know, especially big organizations, right? There's many of them are self-insured, so they can tell you, hey, if somebody trips over an air hose and they break their wrist, it costs us $43,282, right? They can tell you that kind of stuff because they know the cost of it. So we're trying to tell them this new technology is going to help you see trip hazards before they become an accident. It's going to help you see air quality issues before they become people going off to the hospital with breathing problems, right? And theoretically, they could draw the dotted line. But until they had hard evidence, they're going, well, I need to be able to justify the ROI. And that was one of the hardest things for us in the beginning is nobody wanted to jump first. Everybody just wanted to look around and be like, I'd rather let, you know, this organization go first and then they can get the data and that'll help me. Well, fortunately, we got past that. Some of the more forward-thinking companies looked at it and said, we're willing to roll the dice and spend a little bit of money here because if it can have an impact, it could have a substantial impact. And our goal was to try to reduce accidents, recordable accidents, by about 10%. And if we could do that based on the average costs and things like that are available, you know, for understanding what an accident costs an organization, we could pay for ourselves. So if we could cut down on 10%, we pay for ourselves, it'll justify it. Our average customer today across the board sees a more than 50% reduction in recordable accidents. Wow. Some of them, we just had a study done recently by the National Safety Council that worked independently with one of our larger customers in the logistics space, and they found a 74% reduction, right? And so that then turns into it pays for itself to it pays the company to have technology like ours deployed. And there's all kinds of other benefits from a cultural standpoint and communication standpoint and, you know, visibility standpoint, but just the accidents itself, it more than pays for itself.
Wow. So you're probably, tell us a little bit about, you're obviously right in the middle of really scaling right now. And how many countries are you doing business in at this time in states?
Ooh, geez. U.S., Canada, Mexico, Indonesia, Singapore, UK, a place called Eswatini, which I didn't even know existed until a customer from Eswatini found us. Soon to be a couple more places in Europe. We just started expanding there earlier this year. So yeah, it's growing. And then of course all across the United States and in a variety of industries. Anywhere where physical people are doing physical activity. You know, we do a lot in the logistics space, shipping, receiving, warehousing. Oftentimes that's where we'll start off with a trial. So even if they're not, you know, if they're in manufacturing, we'll start off in the shipping department, you know, to prove ROI. So manufacturing, food production, food packaging, construction, we're just in a lot of different industries. You know, there's immediate safety implications that are exciting, but nobody's gathered longitudinal data of this kind from on people, right? And who knows where this data could become valuable later. We know some of our customers actually, when they're designing new buildings, they'll take data from our system and try to understand in our existing buildings, where do we have air quality issues? Where do we have lighting issues? Where do we have congestion of people? What, you know, they can understand more about the building and they go, okay, let's just engineer it out in our next building. Let's engineer the building differently so we don't have the air quality issues and the stuff that they have to take care of later, right? So that's kind of neat to see them apply that data. And then I think too about, back down to the guys like my dad, I made the comment about how do you know your plan's a good one and it's a crappy way to find out it's bad? Well, the data can show you. You know, for example, we prevent a lot of muscle injuries because a lot of those aren't necessarily a one-time event. They're people doing the same thing, doing hard work over and over again for year after year, right? And we can see that buildup of cumulative trauma on their body. So we can look at job roles and we might have 100 workers that do the same thing. And we decide we are going to make this role way less physical. It's the most physical role in our organization. The data shows us that they're the most at risk. We have more shoulder injuries there, more back surgeries. They go, let's change it one way with this group, and let's do a different change. Let's put a lift table in with this group. Let's put a robotic arm in with this group, and let's put a change in process in with this group. And then they can go to the data the next day or hours later if they want to and just look. All three were effective. Job change wasn't terribly effective, moving things around. Robotic arm that was 68% reduction. We reduced a lot of physical energy by that. They're $500,000 a piece, and we got 240 locations, so that's a huge investment. But the lift table was 63% effective, and those are really inexpensive, especially when you compare them to the robot. So even though this was 5% better, from a reduction standpoint, from a cost standpoint, and from a business standpoint, I can say I can get almost the same efficacy out of a lift table, which is much more practical, much more affordable, and we can scale that faster than putting robots in to move the material. That's our solution, and they could do it all from data.
Wow, I love that.
That's just amazing how data is so powerful today. And you've got to understand the business, you got to understand how to use it and make decisions from it. And I think that's a great learning for our achievers is to understand your data and make better decisions from it.
Yeah, and you have to pull the value out, and it kind of goes back to that imposter syndrome. I didn't know necessarily the right questions to ask, but come in with humility, share with them, show them you're trying to become a part of their world, because I'm being asked to go speak on stage in Europe in front of a bunch of safety leaders. And why am I qualified to do that, right? Well, in the early days, it was humbling yourself before them and saying, I'm not a practitioner. You've spent your life doing this, but I know technology and I know there's a better way. Help me understand how I can help you. And that'll take you a long way.
I love the story, and I think you've taken it a long ways, and I want to hear about that. You've told us about scaling with the data, but I want to hear you had to go after funding to grow. You really had to think differently, to find funding so you can scale and you can impact more people. Tell us about that process that you went through, and again, how you had to break through that ceiling in your thinking and your challenging yourself to go after money that you didn't even know existed out there.
Yeah, I'd never raised capital before MākuSafe, so I really didn't know. I went to a class that was put on by Brown Winnick, a capital raising seminar. I heard a gentleman named Matt Ostenek speak, entrepreneur who had gone out and raised capital, had some success. Drug him out to coffee after that and asked him a bunch of questions, and he started pointing me in the direction of some reading and some other resources and things like that. Eventually built up the confidence and knowledge to be able to go out there and talk to folks. And fortunately, I had done a lot of volunteer work, spent some time in Rotary, sat on some different city boards and things like that. So I had a good network of people that were well-to-do and would understand what I'm trying to do. These are people from the insurance industry. These are people from the construction or manufacturing industry. So those were the first people I went to, and they got right away exactly what I was trying to do, and they were willing to write a check and take a chance. Now, early on, I told them, I said, give me $2 million in 24 months, and we'll have a product in the marketplace, and life will be great. And it turned out it was 6 years and more than $10 million to get to market. So thankfully, I also found very patient investors that when I would come back and go, so that's not going to be enough. I'm going to need another and here's, clearly defining what we could do with the next amount of money and so on. So,
well, I would think that in this space, the insurance company would be all over it because it's going into an area that nobody's went into, and now insurance it's tripled in the last few years. So tell us a little bit about the reaction of the insurance companies. Are they behind you, or where are they at in this space?
Yeah, so EMC Insurance, headquartered here in Des Moines, was one of our earliest supporters, and they're one of our largest supporters today. And they were one of the first to kind of grab onto this and go, this has a lot of benefit to us. It's going to reduce payouts on injuries. Part of the role of the insurance company is to provide loss control resources, and they're always looking for, what they can do that's different than what everybody else is doing. Most companies, insurance companies, they have an industrial hygienist or they have an ergonomist on staff, but man, you arm them with this kind of data, for their policyholders, those people can be way more effective in their job. They're not just randomly going out to, policyholders and trying to do one-off checks. They're looking at data going, I need to go here, and then the next day I'm going to go here, right? So it helped make them better informed. Now there's some inherent challenges here. So one, people have insurance to cover the cost of the losses, right? And so when you're trying to decide, do I spend money on technology to help reduce the losses? As a business, I go, okay, I spend all that money and I cut back on the losses. Who gets the benefit of that? Well, financially, the insurance company is going to get, one of the better benefits, right? Because they're not going to be doing as many payouts on claims. And in the work comp space, it takes that business owner about 3 years to actually realize the value. So that their work comp pricing is based on what they call a mod score, an experience mod score. And it's like a 3-year running total of accidents, recordables, and various things. And so in order for them to all of a sudden be like, hey, we made a big difference, we had less, well, you're not going to see much this year. And you're really not going to see a whole lot next year. By the end of the third year, you're going to start to recoup that value. So there's some challenges there in who's getting the value out of it. Now, fortunately, I would say organizations are recognizing that having people hurt, even if they're paid for by the insurance company, is bad business. It's bad for their business. You've got young people that aren't interested in going into these roles. You've got an aging population that you want to keep in position as long as you can, maybe even past retirement age or what's typical retirement age. And if they're hurt or they're constantly getting hurt or the work is too physically hard for them, they're not going to, right? And so what we've found a good organization for us to work with is one that genuinely values their people, and two, they want to make the work better and easier for their workforce, because they understand that they're going to have better retention, they're going to have better company culture, they're going to be able to attract more employees because their employees are going to go tell their friends, hey man, they just, this work is a whole lot easier now. They did all this stuff and made all these changes, and I actually don't feel awful when I come home from work. So I think organizations are starting to catch up and realize that even if somebody pays for the accident when something terrible happens, there's still a cost to that person being injured, right?
It is. So where the tire hits the pavement, you've got stats now. You went in, you had talked about if you could just save 10% injury, fatality, whatever the whole stat is. You went into thinking if you could do that, it'd be a win-win. So tell us what happened and what your stats are today.
Yeah. With the fact that we're reducing those accidents by more than 50% is compelling. We still are at a phase where, again, this brand new industry, organizations don't have line items for this kind of stuff. And we still run into I know that happened for them, but will it happen for us too, right? I know that seems to happen for your other customers, but we're different. And they're right. Every company is different and they do things differently. But I can tell you, every single organization out there, regardless of what you're producing, the data will help you do a couple of things. One, it's going to uncover something you had no idea was going on, right? Which could be critically valuable to all of the things that we just talked about: retention, culture, the hardness of work, all of those kinds of things. Two, we're going to help you confirm a suspicion that you've always operated under, or we're going to reject it, right? You're going to go, well, we know that we have problems here. Well, let's see what the data says. Maybe it's actually not that. Maybe it's that thing over there that's bleeding into this that's causing the problem that you think you have, right? So data will help you confirm or deny suspicions you have. And then the last thing, one of the novel things about this, I thought, people on the front line that are working, they see more and know more than anybody else in the organization. And you can ask any CEO and they'll say, do you want more information from your frontline people or less? Every one of them is going to say, I want more. And so we wanted to give that frontline worker a voice. So that little button on the front, if I push and hold it, see that flashing now? So it's recording what I'm saying, and it'll record up to 15 seconds or until I let up on the button. In a few seconds, my supervisor gets a text message, a transcript of what I just said. It knows that it's me. I can listen to that voice message. So we call that feature My Voice, which gives a voice to that frontline worker. So if they see something that's unsafe, if they have a broken equipment or missing tools or a problem with HR, they don't have to stop their work and go track somebody down or fill out one of the stupid suggestion box cards, that's 300 yards away from them. This immediately gets information to leadership that they can act on. And the best organizations we work with, one of my favorite things that I've seen, they've got a board, and on one side it says, "You said," and it's all the voice memos that have come through in the last however many weeks. And then on the other side it says, "We did," and it's everything they did about it. So you said this, we did this. And sometimes it's as simple as, we've recorded this and we're going to report back to it to the safety committee on a whatever regular basis, right? But acknowledging the fact that somebody on the front line saw something that was valuable to you, and acknowledging that you're doing something about it, is so culture building, because nothing will stop people from shoving cards in that stupid box more than nobody saying anything about it. They took the time to give you some information. You don't respond to it. How many people are going to keep doing it?
Yeah.
Zero.
Well,
I love this conversation.
Yeah.
You've done some amazing things, and you're saving lives, and I think that's a powerful thing for the world and the communities. And I want to ask you, how have you changed? How are you different today than 3 or 4 years ago? And how you've grown yourself because of what you've gone through and because of what you've impacted?
Yeah. I mean, I've learned a lot. I think it was Steve Jobs that said the journey is the reward, right? And so I look at starting this idea on the back of a napkin at a coffee shop in Valley Junction with a mentor of mine, and mapping it all out and saying, "What do you think?" to, I just spent another month in Europe this spring and traveled all over and speaking at conferences and meeting some of the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world. I never would have thought that we would have gotten to this point. I knew what we were doing had global implications, but never would have thought that, just a guy from Iowa, could pull something off that would end up impacting the world in the way that it is. And the organizations that we work with are global, some of the most well-known brands in the history of our planet, and to be engaged in working with them is fascinating. And then just the people that have come along and been a part of that journey, and the people that I get to learn from, and the relationships. And I know, I'm still relatively young. I'm 40, so I've got some time ahead of me, and I'm guessing MākuSafe won't be the last and only thing I do. And just the people I've met along the way, and the connections I've made, and the things I've learned. I'll tell you what, it probably wouldn't be $2 million in 24 months to do it all over again with the knowledge I have, but it'd be a heck of a lot closer to that than what it was, because I had to learn all the things the hard way and the expensive way as we were going through that process. So
yeah, well, that's fantastic.
it is. I think I bet you're a Star Trek fan.
Yeah.
Spock,
Spock and nerd. Yeah, I get it. No,
Captain Kirk and Spock talk this language all the time. Yeah. Got the button. What do you need, Spock? Anyway, this is fascinating. It's great to have someone that understands that journey of getting your stats together. It's a process and sticking with it. Because this stuff just doesn't happen.
Yeah,
and
it takes a lot of people.
It is, and it takes time. And you're helping people, you're saving lives, it's making the world a little better. And you gotta love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes by Tim O'Reilly, the author, and he kind of coined open source and Web 2.0, and it's pursue something so important that even if you fail, the world is better for you having tried. And I feel like we're doing that at MākuSafe, and I think our employees kind of embody that. They recognize that we are going to try our best every single day. And at the end of the day, even if we fail, we have changed the way the world understands human work. Just the fact that we're talking about it, and we've created a buzz about it, and more people are talking about it, and companies are now investing in that. We're changing the paradigm of safety, which hasn't been changed since the OSHA Act, and back in the 70s or 80s, right? So it's been a long time since safety has really kind of changed, and a lot of the folks that have really started to drive that made it about the people, and we're happy to ride their coattails and say they're exactly right. Now let's get you the data that helps you do the things that will serve those people, because those people are serving you with their time as an employer, right? Let's help reinforce that with technology. So
yeah. Anytime that you can educate and inform, and because it's kind of interesting you talk about OSHA, because as a business person, OSHA is like, nobody wants to deal with it. And I think what they do is they throw a lot of telling you got to do this without having the stats and information and education that you need. And I think having this to back it up, and 50%, that's impressive.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a huge impact.
That's a huge impact. If success rate of 50% and within less than 5 years is great. I'm sure you're going to get better as you grow.
Yeah, and we're learning more. Our customers will constantly, share things with us. And what's great, which is also a challenge, sometimes we'll get pulled in because something bad happened, and an organization is finally at a place where they're like, we've had another fatality. We have to change. We've done everything that we know to do. We've followed all of the books, and we've followed all the processes, and we have our safety team, and we're close, but we still have these things happen. And we know that technology is going to help us get the rest of the way there. That's going to be part of the piece of the puzzle that we need. So I think if you go back 15 years, technology like this probably doesn't go anywhere. It's not because people didn't care about people. It was just the mentality was a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Somebody gets hurt, it's the next man in kind of mentality. But organizations that employ, large groups of people to do hard work are recognizing there's really nobody sitting there on the bench waiting to come in. So we have to do something to preserve the folks that we have.
It is. It's a changing world. And I can see insurance and businesses and everybody getting behind this. I mean, this is, if now you're based out of Ankeny, Iowa, and how do they get a hold of you? And you probably have a website, you have everything set up, companies, and what's the process of my company wants to get a hold of you and say, hey, could you come out and do you assess the job, or how does that work?
Yeah, typically, people visit MākuSafe.com. So it's a little play on words. So MākuSafe.com. So Māku is Hawaiian for risk. So there's a little hidden meaning underneath there. Our goal is to obviously eliminate risk. So MākuSafe.com. There's a ton of information. There's some of the case studies like the National Safety Council that we talked about, all kinds of information. And for us, oftentimes we just want to understand what they're challenged with. What are their goals that they're trying to accomplish by investing in something like this? And in some cases, we're not the right technology. If it's, hey, I got a guy that goes out into the field, and if he falls down because of a heart attack, I need a notification. That's not what our tech does. There's stuff out there, right? But that's not a fit for us. So we just want to understand, what are they trying to accomplish? And then oftentimes we end up, getting through a process of contracting, and we do a proof of concept. Our technology, we can outfit a 1 million square foot facility, be up and running and training people in 4 hours. So a lot of times people think about Industry 4.0 or smart factory or this kind of technology. It's got to be this big, long journey, and it's going to take months and stuff. It doesn't. We can be on site gathering data and giving you real actionable insights within hours of being on site. So jump in, and usually, again, we're trying to do a couple of things with a trial. 1, uncover something new that you didn't know was going on. 2, confirm or deny a suspicion that you had of something that was going on. And then 3, improve communication. Let's get some messages from your frontline workers. And if we can do those 3 things, every organization sees value in that.
This has been a great show. I love the conversation. Paul, any big takeaways that you've had from our conversation with Gabe today?
Well, obviously, an entrepreneur like Gabe, he's asking questions is always a big thing. But to take a company with a concept of trying to help 10%, which covers the cost, and then you go to 50%, that's what you call success. And congratulations to you, because you're changing a lot of people's lives and helping businesses, insurance company, and that makes everybody better.
Absolutely. So, our theme was leadership through innovation, and I think you've really shown your leadership and your thinking. And I wanted to bring out a couple things just to really help our audience remember a few concepts that you shared. And I think that curiosity is a big thing. And you mentioned asking the questions, but it's understanding the why. Why is this happening? Why do we need to go there? What's it causing? And I think curiosity is a big thing, and feeling like an imposter. And I want to reinforce that to our audience. That's something that we all go through. And you got to push through it. You got to learn. You've got to grow. You've got to change so you can feel confident, so you can add value to that customer and show that you are an expert in that area. So I thought that was great. And I think, you said it, we got to build capacity to fail. And you gotta build to scale. And so you thought about those things as you're building the company, and you're only a few years old, and you're doing some amazing things. And I think that's fantastic. So I really appreciate you sharing your story. One of the last questions we always like to ask is, what do you want to be known for? What do you want people to remember you as?
Yeah. Oh goodness. Yeah. I mean, and I guess maybe in some ways it might depend on the audience, but. I just I feel really blessed to be here. My journey has not been one that happened just by my own hand. I feel like I've been God-led through this whole thing, from leading me towards my business partner now of almost 10 years, through some of the technological challenges, through some of the roadblocks along the way, even just the mental highs and lows, and so I think I would like my kids to look at it and realize, the more that they lean into Christ and the more that they lean into others and put love out there, the better opportunity they have for success, because the doors they do open. And when you hit that brick wall, or you feel alone, or you feel that it is hard, you've hit that ceiling, like you lean on those things, and that will be what gets you through. You can't bust through it on your own. You'll break your hands trying to punch through that wall.
Absolutely. I think what a great way to close here is, I absolutely am with you. I think you also, with that type of mindset, I think you attract the people that you want in your life. Yeah. And when your partner came because of some of the things that attracted him to you and you to him. And I think the more and more you get that attraction, all of a sudden you got those A players around you, and it's like a snowball effect. The bigger it gets, it's unstoppable.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. And I'm really cool the way you talked about that, because there's a higher power and we all get better. We all,
100%.
And it's really important that we talk about it, because we all make mistakes, and we can only get better by working together. And it's always best when you're working with A players.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
It is. It's all good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us on What You're Sealing, and you've certainly broken through a number of ceilings, and you're doing some amazing things. So I really appreciate you sharing your story and what you've gone through and what you've accomplished. So thank you, Gabe.
I appreciate it.
Well, you achievers out there, take your learnings, put them into practice, and keep growing, keep learning, and helping your business grow.
Yes.
And continue to like us, share us, and subscribe to our programs, and we love to see you next time on the show. So thanks for joining us.
Thumbs up. Give us some comments.